When I create game overview videos, I prefer to have played a game multiple times, preferably with varying player counts so that I can have a full understanding of what the game is. Because the first time you play a game, you have no idea what the arc of the game is and how the repercussions of your earlier actions play out over time and affect everything else. It's really only with the second playing of a game that you start to get into more details of what the game is like and how you can pull the levers to make things happen and respond to other people. Now, that said, today I'm going to talk about Living Forest, a design by Oscar Christensen and French publisher Ludonaut, after having played it only twice, both times with 4 players, because I'm then going to be shipping this copy off to the Board Game Geek Library in Dallas, Texas, so that other people can play it at our convention in mid-November. Yes, Board Game Geek hosts conventions normally in late May and mid-November. It's an open convention with a huge library with thousands of games available, and this will be one of the games there. Let me show you what you can look ahead to if you happen to be attending the convention or just interested in the game itself. Here are most of the components of Living Forest set up for a 4-player game. I have only 1 player board in the shot because all of the player boards are the same other than color. Each player has their own deck of 14 guardian animals and 3 victory tiles. You start with 1 protective tree in the center of your game board, and you can acquire more protective trees and more guardian animals over the course of the game, which you will want to do because you are a spirit of nature protecting the forest against the fires of Onibi. You have fires sitting on the side here. We start with 1 fire in the circle of spirits, and more fire will come into play over the course of the game. Each round, each player takes their deck of cards and reveals cards from the top until they decide to stop or they are forced to stop. Now, you look at the cards, and if they have a solitary symbol here, this black disc that you will also see on these cards, well, those are bad because these animals want to be alone. They don't want to be crowded together. If you flip over a 3rd solitary spirit, then you must stop. That is the end of your turn. You will take 1 action and you will use the elements on your revealed cards to take actions. So in this case, I have 3 sun, and you are going to use sun to acquire new animal creatures. So I have 3. You see the cost in the lower corner of these animals. I could get either of these 2, and if I get one of them, I put it in my discard pile, and the next time I shuffle my deck, that animal will join. This one has another solitary symbol, which is bad because it means I can't reveal as many animals as I might want to. You start with 5 such symbols in your deck of 14 cards. But it has really good stats compared to this one, so you decide how much risk you want to take and what is more important to what you were trying to do over the course of the game. I have 2 water, and with water you can quench fire in the circle of spirits. So if I'm the first player, I could spend 3 sun for one of these. I could spend 2 water to quench this fire and put it face down in front of me. I also have 5 plants. I can add a new tree to my forest that costs up to 5. So these cost 3, these are 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. You adjust the number of trees based on the number of players. Each tree gives you a bonus once it's in your forest, and it will give you extra powers of that element for the remainder of the game. The bottom here is a Sacred Bloom. It does nothing right now except possibly give you victory. I'll talk about that in just one moment. So I decide what I'm going to do. Let's say I'm going to take this tree. I'm going to put it in my board next to something that I already have. Maybe I go here. That's my 1 action. I'm done. Other people are going to take their actions, and at the end of the round, you look and see the sum of the fire in the center of the circle. If your water is less than this sum, you get one of these Varan fire creatures placed in your discard pile for each fire token. So if the sum of my water were less than 2, I would get one of these because there is 1 token. But I have enough water. Maybe someone else will quench that fire. maybe not, maybe they'll do other things. Other people might be taking cards from the display with their sun totals. Maybe someone did quench the fire. We'll just go ahead and get rid of that. Someone took a tree. This is how we end the round. No one is at risk of fire because there's no fire in the circle of spirits, but the animals have been taken here, and for each animal you are going to add a fire. So the level 1 creatures add a 2 fire, the level 2 creatures add a 3 fire, and these would add a 4 fire. And that is how more fire comes into play. The more animals we take while we're leaving these areas unprotected, and the fire comes spreading into our circle. We then refill these spots and prepare for the next round. So all these cards would be discarded. Now, because I know that my deck has 5 solitary symbols, I know there's only 2 left in what's here. So next turn, I can just flip every single thing, and I have no risk of failing. I could, if I want, shuffle my discards and draw, but I have a 3 and 4 chance of getting a 3rd symbol. And why you don't want a 3rd symbol is because if you stop before you get a 3rd symbol, then you can take 2 different actions on a turn. So you want lots of icons in order to do multiple things, but if you press your luck too far, you might get a 3rd symbol and then get shut down with very little to do. The funny thing is, if you get shut down with only 4 cards, well, the sums were probably not that high anyway. I mean, I could have got a plant, and I could have quenched a fire, and I could have got an animal. That all worked, but I only got 1 action. This turn, I get multiple actions. Someone else will go first. You pass the sacred tree at the end of your turn. So now I'd be going last in the turn. Maybe someone else is quenching fire and whatnot. So the actions again. I've got a negative on the sun, so it actually counteracts this. I now have 6 sun, so I can get any of these or either of these. And you can get as many cards as you wish that sum up to your sun total. So I could get these 2. This one comes with a negative, the solitary symbol, but it's got a great plant rating, which means I can buy the higher value trees. This card subtracts sun, which makes it harder to acquire new animals, but it has a gregarious symbol, and when this comes up in your deck, if I had flipped this up, this cancels one of these solitary symbols, so effectively now I have only 1. So it sometimes gives a negative. Well, this is negative. That's a negative, but it gives a Sacred Blossom. But it lets you keep going. And you get to keep the elements on this card. You cancel only the symbol. And so you get to go and reveal more cards and possibly end up with much higher totals than what you would have otherwise. If there's a fire still there, let's see, the plants, these cancel out. So I have only 4. I also have this symbol here, which is circling in the circle of spirits. So I have 2, which means I can move up to 2 spaces, and whatever space I land on, I get that action. So I could move 2 spaces and get a sun action with the sum of my sun here. So it's a little interesting. You sort of double up the action. I could just take a sun action and have 6 to acquire animals, or I can move 2 spaces, get a sun action, and acquire animals. But the reason you want to move around the circle of spirits is because, number 1, you can get bonus actions. Number 2, you can get fragment tiles, these things here, which I'll talk about in a moment. Number 3, if you jump over someone, you don't count their space, but you get to take one of their victory tiles. So if I were able to move 3 spaces, I would take a water action, and I would take one of this character's victory tiles down here. Let's say I want this one. I add it to my collection. Now, to understand why that's important, let's talk about how to win. Your goal in the game is to be the first player to have either 12 different trees in your display. You start with 1 on the board, and you start with 1 on your victory tile. These are different, so I start with a score of 2. I just stole this one, so now I have 3. Actually, and I bought one here, I have 4. 1/3 of the way there. Okay, that's one way to trigger the end of the game, is to have 12 different trees in your collection, which includes the tiles on the side. You can have 12 fire tiles in front of you. So you want to fight the fire, number one, so that you can avoid getting these negative cards that give you a solitary symbol and nothing else. But if you collect fire tiles and you have 12 or more, that triggers the end of the game. Each player starts with 1. You can steal them from others by passing them in the circle. Of course, they can steal them back by passing you. But you can collect fire tiles. No one can take these away. And if you have 12 or more, then that triggers the final round of the game. The other thing you can do is have 12 or more sacred blossoms. You start with 1 sacred blossom. You may have others on cards. This is a +1. This is a -1. So actually I have only 1 blossom at the time. But you can, again, steal them from others by passing them in the circle or acquire them on animals. 1 here, 1 here, 1 here, 3 here. And you have those blossoms when they come up in your line. And if you have a sum of 12 or more blossoms visible on your cards, on your victory tiles, and on the game board, then that also triggers the end of the game. And I mentioned the game board because, again, trees come with their own bonuses. For example, I forgot the 2 sun when I was adding up my sum here for how I can acquire animals. I actually have 8 sun because I have 2 sun right here. In addition, if you complete a row of something, if I used my 4 trees to, actually we can do this, do 4 trees to buy this tree and go here, I've now completed this row. And when you complete a row, it gives you, or a column, it gives you a bonus shown below. So now actually I have 1 additional sun for a total of 9 sun. So in my first action, I can get a tree that adds 1 more sun to the total, and now I've got 9 total. Or, well, look at this. 1, 2, 3 movement in the circle. So I could go 1, 2, 3, steal that token, and then take the water action. Okay, there's little combinations that you can start to put together to get the most possible out of a turn. If you do something in the first action, it can affect what you do in the second action. So you get bonuses here as well. If you complete this column, you get additional movement in the circle. Complete this, you get extra water when you're trying to quench fire or defend against fire at the end of a round. Complete this row, and you get 2 blossoms added to your total. And of course, if you were trying for blossoms, you want to get this tree because this comes with a blossom. You want to get this one because this has blossoms as well. You can get multiple trees of the same type. That's fine. They do not count toward the 12 different tree victory threshold. But if I did this and then let's go ahead and do this here. I've got 3, 6, 8. I've got 8 blossoms already. Plus 1 on the side is 9. I am 3/4 of the way to victory. And no one can steal these trees from me. Only this. And the cards down here, well, I get different assortments each time I go through my deck. So, if you can trigger one of those victory conditions, 12 different trees, 12 fire, 12 blossoms, you complete the round, and if you're the only player who has done that, you win. That's it. If multiple people have completed, then you would add up your sums of everything. How many different trees do you have? How many blossoms do you have? How many fire have you collected? And whoever has the higher sum of that wins. At heart, Living Forest is straightforward. It is a racing game in which you are trying to be the first to cross a threshold. Where the complications come in is that the game is actually 3 races running in parallel with 3 different ways to break that tape at the end of the track. You could just go hard on one avenue, pushing ahead as quickly as possible, and this is what happened in our first game when one player had 14 or 15 fire, and I think the rest of us were just like, how did that happen? We weren't even paying attention. Okay, lesson learned. We played again, and all of us were much more thoughtful about making sure that one person didn't hoard all the fire. The game played out very differently in that the first game we were very active on the Circle of Spirits, jumping one another constantly, trading all these tiles back and forth, just maximizing actions on that circle. Second game, 2 people didn't even move. And the other 2, well, one moved 1 space and one moved 2. And that was it. The circle did nothing. Instead, I don't know if that was a result of our focus on the fire action, where we wanted to make sure that one person didn't take it all. But I imagine everything is interconnected in ways that I don't quite understand yet after only 2 plays. Now, one person in the second game did hit that fire threshold. They did anyway, and they paid much more attention to the turn order, because if you were first player, you get first crack at tackling the fire in the center of the Circle of Spirits. If you are paying attention that lots of animals have been taken, you know how many fire tokens are going to be added to play, and you sort of prepare, and maybe you want to get these fragment tokens that I brought up and did not explain. One action that you can take on a turn, instead of using sun to get animals, or water to quench fire, or plants to get a tree, or the swirls to move in the circle, you can just take a fragment token. And if you move on the circle, you can also get a fragment token. And there's another way to get fragment tokens, that is to reach the corner of your board. So if you cover this space out here with a tree, you get 2 fragment tokens. Same thing up here. If you cover this space, you get a bonus sun action, adding to your total of whatever you have in front of you. Bonus water action, add to that total. Well, what you use these fragment tokens for is to discard the last card that you have revealed in the first phase of the game. When you're flipping cards over, if you flip a card with that 3rd solitary symbol, you can discard a fragment token and move that card to your discard pile. And then you can keep flipping or you can stop as you wish. If you flip over one of the fire cards that has just the symbol, then you move this card back to the deck. It's out of play, it's out of your deck permanently, you're done at the cost of 1 token. So in this case, the person saw there were lots of animals gone. They used an action to get fragments. They flipped over a ton of water on their turn, got lots of fire, went around the circle, took all sorts of things. That was it. Crossed the threshold. They were the first player of the round, and the rest of us said, I guess we can't do anything about that. However, the last player in the round, turns out they had 9 trees. They had enough mojo, enough elements to get another tree, one they did not have, and move over 2 people in the Circle of Spirits to steal 2 tiles, both trees, and suddenly they had 12 trees. And it was a standoff at the end of the game, but the person who had the most fire won. So, looked like it was close. It was amazing to see that, because did not see that person either. I'd sort of noticed, oh, you seem to be getting lots of trees, but they quickly snuck up to the end, and I can imagine that happening in many games, because you can steal freely from the victory tiles of other people if you can pass them. While reading the rules for Living Forest, I came to the section on the action phase that talked about how you will get 2 or 1 actions based on the number of solitary symbols you reveal, and then how you will sum the 4 types of elements before you can take various actions with them as described on the following pages. And my immediate response was, this might be better as an app, a feeling that intensified following 2 playings of the game. It's great that you're able to use the results of your first action in your second action, but this means you are often doing 2 or even 3 calculations on a turn to figure out what you can do to maximize your chances in the game. The first calculation comes when you're revealing cards at the start of the turn. You're keeping a tally of all 4 elements. Okay, I've got this available, I got this. Oh, this is a negative on my sun. Okay, but it gave me a plant, and you're trying to keep track of what's possible based on what you're flipping. I'm imagining these 4 flowing lines of how things are going, generally escalating, but not always. You've got blossoms as well. That's a 5th thing to keep track of if you were going for a blossom win. At some point, you're going to say, well, maybe I have to stop flipping. What can I do with what I have available right now? And does it work towards my goals? And maybe I need to take a chance and flip something else. But also, what are the odds of me flipping a solitary card based on what's left in my deck? And so on. So you figure all that out. And great, if you're the first player, then you can go ahead and do whatever you plan to do, because No one can stop you from doing that. If you're the second, third, or fourth player, however, your plans might be disrupted by what the first player does. I had one turn in particular where everything hinged on me moving 3 spaces in the circle, leaping 2 people, getting stuff from them, landing on this particular space that would then, give me a plant action that would then fuel something for my second action. But the player in front of me moved on the circle, and I could no longer jump them, and I couldn't take that plant action, which couldn't do anything else. And then so I had to go back and say, okay, let me figure out my turn again. But wait, what elements did I have? And so I had to recalculate the elements again and figure everything out. Perhaps this is mostly an issue with me, now mid-50s, not keeping everything in my head as well as I might have in my youth. But I found myself, especially as third or fourth player, I don't even know what's going to be available in terms of the animals, where people are going to be in the circle, whether there's any fire left. Often you're just flipping and saying, what are the odds of me busting? And I'll stop. And then as the first and second player go and it gets around to my turn, I'll start being like, okay, this is what I have. I think this is what I can do now. It's harder to make plans just because things won't be there. So the design is somewhat similar. Not really, but it has the same feeling of Ludonauts Cult Express, because in that game, you are robbing a train, you're moving characters around on a train and trying to shoot other people and pick up money and so forth. And it's highly tactical because people are playing cards face down, and you are trying to imagine where people are going to end up based on what you might do if you were them, or what cards are out of play, because not everything goes back in play. So you're making guesses on how things are going to play out, but then you actually reveal the cards and see what happens. And it's interesting programming, some wild things happen just based on luck. Here, you're trying to make plans, and then the plans might just be taken off the table because someone else did stuff. And it's out of your control, and so you often just want to wait till it's your turn again, but then you often have to add everything up. And again, maybe it's just us all not being ready. But if this were an asynchronous app where I could flip for my turn and just worry about the probability of what comes up, and then I gotta notice again it's my turn, I see what's available at that time, here's your totals, and you just click through everything. Boom, done. Another player said that as well. This would be great as a digital game, but it's not. So you just have to keep it all in your head, which can feel a little bit more like work. Just trying to maximize everything. Maybe with more experience, that would become more natural, and I would not have to worry about that. Now, there's another issue that came up, and again, this might be mostly me, but I thought I'd talk about it because it came to mind, and others kind of expressed the same opinion. The artwork by Apolline Etienne is gorgeous. The animals feel solid and like they're all part of the same world. You see the color palette going through. You've got these repeating rune symbols on them. Everything looks great. The issue came to mind when you start looking at the gregarious animals and the solitary animals. And this is partly just the rulebook issue describing the black solitary coin and the white gregarious coin. And you see the animals here with this inner glowing light, if they had this gregarious nature. And then you have this purplish dark undershadow for the black solitary coin. Maybe I'm being too reductive about this, but the feeling and the rules and the artwork and the gameplay itself all solidify a feeling that comes across as white good, black bad. And I am sure that Ludonaut does not intend to put across any sort of message or feeling along those lines. This is possibly me just reading into what's presented in the game, and I can understand Ludonaut wanting to present a strong contrasting graphic look. And if you look at all of the other components in the game, you have these bright, vivid colors on the player boards themselves and on the other animal cards and everywhere else. And so you're presenting a strong, clear graphic opposition with white and black. But then it also presents this feeling that the black characters are going to hurt you and stop you from doing things, and you must prevent that from happening thanks to the arrival of the white gregarious characters. Again, I might be reading too much into this, but it feels like black and white as oppositions in this natural trope that we often have of white good, black bad should go away. Should not be used in games. And I don't mean to call out Ludonaut in particular for doing this, because many games do something like this, but it struck me as I was reading the rules and then playing that it really had that feeling as you're flipping over the cards of what you want to see and what you don't want to see. And it's a shame, because it took me away from being in the world that had been created. Ludonaut does a lot of work to create its worlds and bring them to life. Sometimes a little too much so, where they go over the top. Like, you could have Colt Express without having the 3D train, but they have that just to put you in there and give you a feeling, a simulationist feeling of what's going on. And in this game, the excess is not as much. I mean, the player boards you need in order to organize things in the Circle of Spirits, but then you have stuff like this board here, which just holds the fire cards and the fragments, which you don't need at all. Or this board, which holds the animals and then the fire. We did not use this to hold fire, and we did not use this to hold fragments. I just pile stuff on the table, and we dig out the things as we need them. Again, that's just me, but I don't need quite so much stuff going on. But that's my taste. And again, I might be reading too much into this. I don't want to call them out, but it's more just to notice that we should find other ways to present this type of opposition. There's a natural red-green, not natural, there's a human-created red-green opposition through traffic signals that is carried over into a lot of games, where green means do something and red means stop doing something. You have some, but that doesn't work with color blindness issues, and so you got other issues where you're going to have symbols in here. And it's more just something that came to mind as I was playing the game, saying it'd be good not to see something like that again. And that's sort of secondary to the issues of the game itself, where it has an interesting challenge of you trying to push through and stop other people from doing things, and it's hard to make a judgment after only 2 plays with only 4 people as to what the game is like. So hopefully you can take something from my description and see whether you think it might work for you. I can imagine as well the game would be very different with 2 people, because you would have only 2 of you on the circle. There's going to be very little jumping going on in the circle, so you can plan much more exactly what you're going to do and where you're going to move to double up actions and have everything work out, because the odds, again, of someone taking exactly the animals you want with only 1 other player seems much smaller, is much smaller. So maybe it'd play out much differently that way. You would have much more forward planning for what's going to happen in future turns, although you're still dependent upon the luck of what you flip, unless you get fragment tokens to keep bad things away. Bad things. Negative, solitary. The wording needs work as well. But there you go. For now, you got introductory overview to Living Forest.